Hey guys and gals, welcome back to my show, Coffee with Lisa. So excited to have you here.
I'd like to love you every day. I'd like to love you. I'd like to love you, if I may. I'd like to love you.
Here at the Canadian Brewhouse, one of the fastest growing restaurant industries in Canada, and they're rapidly expanding into new markets. We're going to talk a little bit more about plant life and banquet a little bit later, but first we want to get to know Jim a little better. So Jim, tell me a little bit about yourself. How did you end up here at the Brewhouse?
It's a fun story. I find a lot of people who pursue a career in the restaurant industry are former veterans of the other side of the bar, if you will. When I was working for a different restaurant group in Western Canada, Northland Properties, and I was opening all of their new Rockfords across Western Canada, and I was responsible for developing training materials, training the staff, and this was in my early 20s. I got pretty lucky. If I can rewind, actually, I got started when I was 16 at Dairy Queen.
Good old DQ.
Hey, it's frontline hospitality. It doesn't change whether it's that, quick service, fine dining. It's all the same.
Yeah.
And then I ended up with the Canadian Brewhouse strictly through going down there with my team all the time. I was living out of a hotel with training at the New Rockford here on the south end of Edmonton. And the nearest restaurant that was fun was the Canadian Brewhouse. So I kept going there and got to know the owners and management. And one day they stopped by and said, "Would you like to try something different?" And I didn't realize that something different meant less pay in a remote city I'd never been to before. But that was kind of my MO back in the day, was I love to travel and get to meet new people. So it was a very exciting opportunity. I took it and I haven't looked back for the past 8 years.
So you were an actual regular at the Canadian Brewhouse.
I was, yeah.
And we just recently talked. So for those of you who don't know, Jim, this is the first live he's ever been on Facebook.
Very exciting.
And he's dabbling with the thought of having his own podcast. And he told me about a fantastic ideas. Comment if you like this idea. Jim, what's your idea?
So if I ever were to do something like this, my idea was a show called From Across the Bar, or Other Side of the Wood, or something like that, where I would go to various restaurants, not just our restaurants, because that's a little biased, but and meet the long-standing 10-plus year regulars of those bars and get to actually know their story. Because most people that are regulars at a bar are going there to make connections. They're going there to meet people because they maybe don't have that social dynamic outside of some sort of social lubricant, or just they're more comfortable there than they are in other environments. And most people that are long-term regulars at the bar, most of the long-term employees don't really know that person. It came about because I sat down at the Brewhouse and I was chatting with a guy named Bud Light.
Bud Light. Seriously,
and I wasn't having a drink. It was the guy's name.
I love it.
And he'd been there for 10 plus years.
Yeah.
And I asked him, I said, "Bud, I've been chatting with you for a few years here, and I don't really know you at all." I said, "Where are you from? What's your story? His parents were passed or whatever," but I asked the question a little more tactfully at the time. And he said, "You know what, Jim, no one's ever asked me that." And I thought that was remarkable, that in 10 plus years at one place as a regular, no one really got to know the person.
Yeah.
They just got to know the brand, and also that he was a regular and a good guy. And that was about the extent of how well they knew him. So that would be what I would probably do, because it's interesting to me.
And so now tell me a little bit about you. So you grew up here where? Edmonton?
I was born in Edmonton, but by about 3 weeks old, I was sick of the cold. So I took the family and moved out east. Military kid. So my dad got posted to Winnipeg, then Trenton, then Ottawa, then Petawawa, then wherever. I probably moved 50 plus times in my 32 years on this earth. And so I'm a bit of a rolling stone, but I like that. And I graduated high school in the Netherlands, which is where my mom still lives.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah. My dad lives in Ontario. He's a former military guy. He was full-time, then reserves, got his PhD, and now he's just a professor and research guy.
Just a professor.
Whatever. I don't know. He calls himself the real kind of doctor, not one of those MDs. So, but so my family's still spread out. My brother actually lives with me here in Edmonton, and then by chance in the restaurant industry, I was working out of Vancouver, and we opened a restaurant here in Edmonton, and somehow I'd never guessed this would be my permanent home, but the first house I ever bought was here, and that was when I moved back.
And when you first started working for the brew house, we never did finish. You were in a very remote place, considering from Edmonton.
Considering Grand Prairie, I mean, anyone that knows Edmonton knows GP, and it's 60,000 people, but a transient population of 250, at least when I was there, when oil was booming. So it never felt slow. It felt busy. It felt like a busy small town, which was really nice. And I love it there still to this day. I've lived in everywhere that people seem to hate: Prince George, Hinton, Grand Prairie. Yeah,
it's a small little town in Saskatchewan. I can totally relate.
And I've loved every single one of those cities I've lived in. And I genuinely believe it's sort of what you make it. You know?
Absolutely. It's not always the experience, it's how you make the best of an experience.
Of course. Right? There's good people everywhere. So.
Yeah, absolutely. And so now you have a little girl.
I have just my world. My little daughter Mila, turns 3 in May. So she's at the most exciting age.
Absolutely.
She got out of bed this morning, and actually I'll tell you a funny story if I can.
Absolutely.
When she was just turning 2, this is when she really started to find words, and I remember one day she opened the fridge, looked inside, and she's like, "Daddy, we need to go buy grapes." And I was like, "We don't need to go buy grapes." So I looked in the fridge. Sure enough, there's no grapes. So I was like, "Okay, let's go buy grapes." And then as I'm walking out the door, she's like, "Daddy, don't forget your wallet." I'm like, "Settle down. I'm a grown man. I have my." Okay, I need to go get my wallet. So I'm looking forward to when she's 4 and she's managing my finances.
Yes, and your calendar.
And my calendar. I don't need to talk about that. To tune everyone up to that joke, I thought we were meeting at 9, so I was all panicked, telling her, like, "I'm going to be late. I have a meeting at 9," and turns out we actually booked this whole thing for 9:30 to start chatting anyway.
Yeah.
So.
It's all good. It's all good. Welcome, Scott and Brian. Thank you for joining us. So tell me, I know that you worked your way up to the VP here in Human Resources, and what was your education?
Heavy question. When I was 16, I graduated high school, and again, that was in the Netherlands, and I moved back to Canada, and then I took 1 year of theater school, and then I got a job at Dairy Queen, as I mentioned, and that's about the highlight of my actual background in formal education. Now, I do a lot of personal development courses as well as human resources courses through the university now. When I was 16, I didn't want to do human resources. I always believed that, I don't know if you know Toby from the show The Office, but that was my mentality of human resources, just a stick in the mud, policy pushing, as a lot of people believe. And I didn't really realize what it was truly about at the time. And then I realized that, and this is not for every career, but education isn't as important in a formal setting as it is to continue to educate yourself. I still think I'm intelligent enough to get by day to day, and I don't know that I need a degree to validate what I do. Yeah,
I totally agree with that. I think that our education system and the idea and the concept or the social side of what is education is rapidly changing. That we don't need to get a degree, that we don't need to go to a college to actually have a really good, successful business or a career, but we do have to be dedicated consistently to our learning.
And I can relate it back to my daughter, actually. When, of course, as a parent, I was worried that she was behind developmentally because she wasn't, playing Mozart on the piano at 14 months, as you see these YouTube wonder kids doing or whatever. But when she was, I don't remember her exact age, but when she started in a day home where there was 4-year-olds, 2-year-olds, 3-year-olds, 5-year-olds before she was 2. And within a week, she was talking. Within having that social engagement with kids older than her, I didn't potty train her. She potty trained by other kids just using the potty, right? And I believe that social development is, and by that I mean developing personally through a social environment, is what's really going to get you ahead. Interacting with other experts such as yourself, for me, is going to further me than I believe I would be able to learn in a classroom setting.
And I think too, it pushes you beyond your comfort zone. And I think being pushed beyond your comfort zone on a regular basis makes you a better person as a person in a whole, but it also allows you to grow.
Yeah, well, when you work out, you hurt your muscles, and that's the only way they build and get stronger. So stress is often this term that's thrown around as a really bad thing, but small amounts of stress are the only way that we get stronger mentally and physically.
Yeah, absolutely.
when she was just turning 2, this is when she really started to find words. And I remember one day she opened the fridge, looked inside, and she's like, "Daddy, we need to go buy grapes." And I was like, "We don't need to go buy grapes." So I looked in the fridge. Sure enough, there's no grapes. So I was like, "Okay, let's go buy grapes." And then as I'm walking out the door, she's like, "Daddy, don't forget your wallet." I'm like, "Settle down. I'm a grown man. I have my." Okay, I need to go get my wallet. So I'm looking forward to when she's 4 and she's managing my finances.
Yes, and your calendar.
And my calendar. I don't need to talk about that. To tune everyone up to that joke, I thought we were meeting at 9, so I was all panicked, telling her like, "I'm going to be late. I have a meeting at 9," and turns out we actually booked this whole thing for 9:30 to start chatting anyway.
Yeah.
So. You want to talk about this?
Yes, absolutely. We want to talk about this. So the biggest thing that's for those of you who are tuning in who don't know, Canada legalized marijuana in October of last year, and the Canadian Brewhouse has branched out into a division called Plant Life. Let's talk about that. How did that all happen?
We do this regular manager retreat once a year, which is an ideation. So we get all of our leadership together in a room for a couple of days, and everyone shares their ideas on how to improve the company, whether that's saving money, making money, executing better, anything. Any idea is a good idea. And then as a reward for them sharing their ideas and helping us become what we have, we all go to a destination together to celebrate and see what else there is out there. So 2 years ago, before cannabis was legalized, it was legalized in Denver, or in the state of Colorado. So we booked that year's trip to Denver. And unbeknownst to all of us except for ownership, there was a second purpose, and that was to see the business side. Right. They're never off. They're always working.
That's right.
To see the business side of cannabis, knowing that it was going to be legal. And would it be plausible for us to open a dispensary or 2 or 20 or whatever it ends up being? And it turns out that it's a great business for us because realistically we operate in a very similar venue with much more challenges. Retail, though there is certainly challenges with cannabis, you're not worried about the demand challenge. The people want it, as everyone's seen in Alberta with the moratorium on licenses. It's because we sold out of weed. Sorry, but that's the reality.
That's exactly the reality.
And so that's how we started, and then we came back, and it wasn't announced to anyone until very close to the legalization date, and then they didn't want to announce something to get people excited, and then all of a sudden we couldn't get licenses, or it's not open to
deliver,
or
you're known for delivering.
We can't deliver. Or that kind of delivery.
Yes.
Sorry.
Not actual.
Yes.
I mean, that's out of your control.
Yeah, but we didn't know if it was going to be private or public licenses or government controlled. If AGLC would be the only ones who could hold licenses in Alberta. So some provinces did a lottery, like Ontario just had theirs, and they only issued 25 licenses out of thousands of applicants. So there were definitely challenges going in to make it, and it's expensive. It's prohibition being lifted for the second time ever, and that's a very exciting prospect, but at the same time
has its own challenges.
It changes the economy around that side of the business for sure.
And so how do you because now you've got Canadian Brewhouse, you've got Plant Life, and you have now another division that is launching, which is called Banquet.
Yes.
Now let's talk about Banquet a little bit.
Banquet Premium Dive Bar. So it's hard to say that this idea came from one location. I can tell a fun little story around it.
Did this happen in an ideation again?
No, our owner was up in Fort McMurray talking. We have our busiest location is up there in Fort McMurray in the Timberley area, and they're opening a new development right across the street. And talking to the property developer there, he was like, "Man, I wish we could just put a brew house there." But it's a snowball's throw from our current location. And Roger said, "Well, that would be a great spot for our second concept." And the developer was like, "Oh, you have a second concept?" And more or less, not technically, but more or less inked the lease right there. Roger, our owner, came back to the office and was like, "Guys, we need a second concept because we're going to open one no matter what." So
what is it?
So it's a premium dive bar. So you're looking at nice classic cocktails. Bartending has become a career again, which is very exciting. That mentality of a craft cocktail bartender. So we have that side. We have a line price food menu. Sorry. We have a bunch of unique games in there that I can't reveal right now. It's just one of those things that you kind of have to see. But you look at like Beercade, Rec Room, stuff like that. They're doing this arcade thing, but we thought we would do it, but we just make it our own anyways, and not just throw in a bunch of Buck Hunters or whatever. And we throw a couple of those, but we build our own games, which is pretty neat.
So you're building your own games. Cool.
We also have bowling. You know, social bowling has become a huge thing, especially down in the States, which I'll be honest, we get a lot of our influence for new ideas down there. They have a population over 10 times ours. So
exactly.
They obviously have some concepts that do some things right. And we're big on innovation. So a few of the ideas have come from down there. So we have bowling. We have a rooftop games patio with some of your classic stuff like cornhole, but some other unique ideas as well.
And so when does that open?
We're looking May or June of this year.
In
Fort McMurray.
In Fort McMurray.
Yes.
So first location is Fort McMurray.
Yes.
And then if that goes well, you'll just
we have a couple other locations that we're full go on. I can't
that's
that
fine. I understand that.
Yeah.
Our next one, we'll talk about that.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So now, does Canadian Brewhouse have plans to go international?
I've pushed this one a lot. I have friends who work for other restaurant companies that have expanded into the United States and the UK and Japan and New Zealand. And it's a very exciting prospect. I'm not just like, let's go to Hawaii because I want to go to Hawaii. I'm like, let's go to wherever this one market is in the United States, and here's why. That could use one of our brands there. I do believe fully that we will. Not soon. You know, we're expanding to Ontario late this year, early next year.
Good.
So that's the next branch for us. You know, Alberta-based company. We went out east to Saskatchewan, then out west to BC, then out east to Manitoba, and now we're heading to Ontario.
So pretty soon you will be in every single province.
Well, I guess the 5. I don't. You know, we don't know what the Maritimes look like yet. We don't know what the territories look like. I know we've looked up north and we've looked far east, but at the very least, we'll be starting a major growth expansion in Ontario.
Good.
Yeah.
But that causes a lot of HR challenges. So what is the biggest challenge that you find in your job?
Oh, you know what? Down in the United States, hospitality has always been a career. You could be a career server, you could be a career restaurant manager, and you're not really scoffed at or looked down upon as, you know, when are you getting a grown-up job? And my parents asked me that when I got into my my first job with the company before Brewhouse, when I was just a bartender. My dad wanted me to go to Queen's University and become a doctor and
follow his footsteps.
Yeah, well, he wanted me to be the other kind of doctor, I guess. Yeah, not quite as good as him, but
almost.
Yeah, almost. And I didn't want to, for the same reason that I wouldn't pursue post-secondary now. And up here, it's not that I've seen the same mentality where it is a solid career choice. The reality is it is, whether it comes to financial stability or anything, it's there. And you can, as I've shown, make a career out of it in other fields outside of, when we have a VP of construction. So, you know, whether you work in the restaurant, you could still do anything else.
Exactly. So for those of you who are just tuning in, just so you know, Canadian Brewhouse actually handles all the construction of their locations. So they keep it internal as well as they do their printing, which is another interesting concept. But anyways.
So the HR challenge is hiring the right people. To be honest, you can put tens or hundreds of thousands of dollars into your training. You can put tens or hundreds of thousands of dollars into your management being the right people. But if you don't have every single person, if you don't perfect your hiring process before anything else, it doesn't matter. If they're not aligned with what you care about, your vision, your core values, however you want to phrase it, then you're hiring people who you're setting up to fail. And that doesn't mean they're bad people. It just means you care about different things. So there's a lot of people in Canada, and there's a lot of amazing ones. And that doesn't mean that they're amazing for us or we're amazing for them. And
so it's really understanding, first of all, it's you understanding what roles you want to put people in.
Yes.
And then it's understanding that those are the people that complement those roles so
Right.
they can succeed.
Well, we had an amazing general manager at one of our locations who wasn't happy. And he ended up taking a pay cut to take an entry-level position at our head office because it was something more suited to his character. Now, core value-wise and alignment, number one, he was a perfect fit. But he was meant to be training people. He wasn't meant to be running a location and dealing with P&L statements and all those sort of things. He didn't have that in him, and no slight against him. And he's excelling. He's actually our regional manager for Plant Life now. So you know, he's found something that he's passionate about and that he fits in, and he's always been a culture fit with us. So it's about having the right people for sure, but the right places you keyed on is just as important.
Yeah. Well, and understanding how to ask the right questions at that interview process would be highly pertinent in order to actually acquire the right people to fit the right roles, and then for them to understand what roles that they really want to fit in. So what are some of the tips or tricks that, because you guys have mastered it, you really have mastered it. And there's very few businesses that can say that they've mastered their HR, they've mastered how to figure out roles. It's true. It is very true. It's there. Why we're here.
We're getting there.
So if you were to give 3 tips
sure
to somebody who's watching this, whether they're a small business owner or they're in HR or they're hiring, what would they be?
Hiring, 3, it's very easy. 1, throw away people's resumes. You're not going to get to know anything about a person that matters from a piece of paper that tells you about their work history, their volunteer experience, and I've received a million resumes, and half of them aren't up to my formatting standards, but that's not a reason not to hire somebody. Throw away the resume. Dial in ownership into the hiring process. If I came in and I decided exactly how our hiring process would look, it might not actually attract the right talent. It would attract the right talent to match with me as a person, culturally and vision-wise, etc. But your ownership, who sets the vision, and they are the people that started and built the company, you have to align with them, because ultimately they're going to take the company a direction, and if you don't hire people that are aligned with their vision,
what's the point?
It's going to fall apart. And ask questions related to them that shows that you care, because I'll give you an example. One of the questions that was introduced to me, I didn't come up with this or anything, but who in your family do you most admire and why? It seems simple. It doesn't seem like a very impactful question, but if I were to answer that, I would probably say my dad, or my brother, or my mom, or my daughter. Deep down,
you gotta choose one of them.
Deep down, it's my brother. There's a reason I fight with him to come live with me everywhere I move. I'm just drag him along for the ride, and it's because he's one of the hardest working people I know. He doesn't quit. He works his butt off, and he expects and holds everyone else to that same standard. And what you get when you ask that question of people is you're getting an insight into what matters to them and how they work and how they operate. If somebody says, it's my mom, she's so kind-hearted, this is what she's done, she adopted 2 other kids and whatever, then you know that this person's charitable and cares about their community and the environment around them. So asking more personal questions and less experience related. I can get through your resume and I can find out what I need to know in 5 minutes, but I'd rather spend the other 25, 55, whatever it is, depending on the role, getting to know you. Because ultimately, again, it's not if your experience is a fit. I can teach you to do anything except be a good person. Yeah, absolutely. So you say throw away the resumes. So if you are, how do you determine who actually even gets an interview then, if you're throwing away resumes? That's a very valid point. You have to get to a stage before you can throw away the resume. So, okay, but at the same time, I didn't have any formal human resources experience on paper before I got offered this role. I was fortunate to be with a company that recognized my value intrinsically and less so on paper. But it's about talking to everyone. If you're putting out a job ad, make the job ad specific enough so that it only attracts certain people. And then you should be talking to all those people, even if it's just a quick 5-minute phone screen. Have whoever's responsible for that trained in how to get key details in 3 or 4 questions, and then you could throw away the resume from there. So do you do a lot of interview over like Skype and media, being able to Zoom and so forth? Do you do a lot of interview just to weed them out quickly in those couple questions? Well, we're lucky in that I shouldn't be hiring for a location for a server. That is something where I can generate the ad, create some great interview questions that are impactful, and then I can pass that whole process over to the management of the location. So I personally do conduct a lot of interviews for key roles, and it's hard to define key role, but let's just say general manager and head office. That's all right. And so most of mine, because I don't care if you're from Toronto, Calgary, Hong Kong, wherever, if you're the right fit, I want you. And that means that, a lot of my interviews do happen over Skype because we have 1 million people in Edmonton out of a 7.7 billion population world. So I have better odds finding the right person if I look in a broader market. So Zoom and Skype are probably my number 1 and 2. And so hiring is a one challenge. What is a challenge as the VP
What is your biggest challenge?
I would say the expectation that if I have to hold people to a certain standard of who they want to work with, that I have to do the same with my team. And I have to be able to garner that respect from my team through proper communication. And, it's a tricky world, both in the view of human resources, that Toby from The Office or whatever, but also with the social climate and the way things are nowadays. It feels to everyone like there's a lot of taboo topics and a lot of things you can't talk about. And, you can't do this in an interview. You can't say this. And the reality is you can always control how you react to a situation.
Yeah.
But I would say my biggest challenge as a VP is having the right people on my team, because if my team is not the best, I can't expect that standard out of anyone else.
Yeah, absolutely. And so are there holes in your team right now for anybody who's watching?
Yeah, oddly enough, in recruitment, we mutually parted ways with our previous recruitment coordinator, great gal, and just moved on to things that were more suited to what she likes to do and her personality. But so we're looking for someone to help us find those right people.
So if you're watching, Jim's looking for recruitment.
Yes, absolutely. So
very good. Well, welcome. I see we have Cheryl on and Scott on, Brian on, Cindy on, Ron on. Thank you for joining us. So now tell me, what's next for Jim?
Is my boss watching?
I don't know.
What's funny is this is the one thing that I've felt most people miss in their own personal development and their career development is they don't put their hand up enough. People wait for opportunity, and sometimes that can work. Working hard and putting your head down, it goes a long way, especially nowadays when the mentality is people don't work hard anymore. Yeah, which is BS, by the way. People do.
Lots of people do.
It's just not recognized, unfortunately. Yeah. We throw around the term millennial like it means everything. I would say that I don't know. I don't have a set answer. I'm really happy where I am, and I don't know that it has to be human resources or if it could be a different department. I'd love to see myself grow into an ownership role, and whatever that means. Does that mean the VP of HR with some sort of share in the company? Does that mean that I become the CEO or executive vice president or whatever? I don't know. That's I know that there's a lot more.
Absolutely. Well, I know you well enough to know, and you are driven. So we talked a little bit about hard work, and there are a lot of people who can work really, really hard. But if you do not have drive, real drive, you will not advance in your career. You will not advance in your business. Drive is a huge component.
Well, and drive, I may have drive in one area and completely lack it in another. Yeah. So we talked about my calendar management, something that's very important. Zero drive. I don't care. Organization is whatever.
That's where you hire that.
Yeah.
You hire that.
Right.
You state your strengths, right? And you hire your weaknesses.
Drive comes from passion.
Yeah.
And I have a friend who used to work for me at the Brewhouse in Grand Prairie, and she just opened her first own tattoo parlor with her partner out in Toronto. And so she wasn't a tattoo artist when she lived in Grand Prairie. This is 8 years ago. And now 8 years later, because of that drive stemming from passion, what she cared about, she's opening her very first place, her own shop, which is very exciting. So she's a
millennial. Is that where this tattoo come from?
No, it'll be where my next tattoo comes from though. But she's, she's a millennial, by the way. So they do work. They have drive too.
They have drive. I think millennials get a bad rap in general.
Yeah.
They get we don't understand, or there's a lot of people who don't understand truly the drive behind a millennial and what they can offer and their specific roles. And so rather than saying that they have a lot of drive and that they're successful and that they look at things differently, people just lump them together and say they're not useless, but some people say that.
There's more opportunity now, and from that it gives people the option to choose what they want to do with their lives, which is awesome. Simon Sinek talked about the golden circle.
The golden circle.
Yeah, where he talks about the power of why, and he also had that speech on millennials, and I don't really connect with him as a speaker. I think he's a little bit whatever. I think he's not my kind of guy. But I do believe in his message a lot of the time, and what he was talking about was attaching purpose, reason why to what people do. Yeah. There's no problem with that. That's super important. Otherwise, you're going to get disconnected, undriven employees instead of purpose-driven, excited team members.
Yeah, absolutely. And that purpose, excited, driven, that why, even networking is highly valuable, because there's nothing worse than when you're in a networking event and you get introduced to somebody and they say, hi, my name is John and I am the VP of so-and-so, rather than saying, this is why I wake up in the morning, this is why you should be connected to me, this is my purpose in my life, and oh, but by the way, I just happen to sell computers.
Yeah, exactly.
Right? Like, and that's a whole philosophy around what Simon Sinek said. So I'm like you, I don't necessarily resonate with him as a speaker, but I do really love his message.
Oh, he's incredibly intelligent, and he, you know, what he talks about is typically fairly accurate. And yeah, I guess there's no disputing that. No,
there isn't. And I was just recently in Calgary meeting a colleague who had come in from New York and was talking about the value of your online presence. And we've talked a little bit about online presence.
Yes.
Jim lacks in that area, but he's going to change things very quickly, because we're going to bring a podcast. Him and I are going to sit down at the very first location and have his podcast, because I'm going to make him do it. First of all, because I'm going to push him out of his comfort zone. And Mo, our lovely videographer here, is going to actually have all the video. So stay tuned to that. But it is about why. It is about purpose. And so when I had met with in Calgary with Samir, and we talked a little bit about online presence, and that genuine authenticity of how you build relationships starts with your why, not with what you do and not how you do it.
Yeah. But on LinkedIn, I had about 200 connections or whatever for the longest time, barely logged in. Then I updated my picture, created a proper bio, connected it to our company, whatever, all that stuff. And then I wrote an article. And it was just one simple article, but it was about a leadership course that we held, and the point of the significance of valuing your employees and investing in them, and to help build their future and not just yours as a company. And you know, this was probably 8 months ago I wrote this. Well, it was just after October, because that was when the course was, and I have 3,000 connections or something now, and very few of those people I reached out to. And I think that stems from what you're saying, is that online presence can be very impactful.
Yeah.
Don't get me wrong, some of them want me to work in China at some weird remote site, but
as their sales guru.
But a lot of those connections are genuine connections, and actually it's really helped me in the recruitment side of things and connecting with the right people. And I connected with a guy on there for a key role at the office, and he didn't want the role, but he connected me with somebody else who it looks like we may be hiring, you know, and that's where the for us, at least in HR, the importance of having that online presence stems from.
Yeah. Moving forward, Plant Life, Canadian Brewhouse is growing, Banquet is growing, and there's probably a few other nuggets, golden nuggets, sitting on the back in the ideation.
Yeah.
Where do you think Brewhouse will be in 5 years?
5 years. The goal is, you know, you mentioned that we perfected our hiring process, and the reality is you never will. Because the world changes, the expectation changes. 5 years ago, we probably would have had more success advertising. We were hiring through, maybe 10 years ago, through print than we would through digital. So you always have to continue to grow and develop. I'd say staying the course, but also in 5 years, I do expect that we're international, and maybe that's ambitious. I expect well over 100 locations of all of the brands combined. We're currently at 35, 32 brewhouses, 3 Plant Lives that are technically open.
Yeah.
But I expect within 5 years over 100. And it's funny, when I joined the company, we were 4 locations, all brewhouses, 2 franchises, 2 corporate. And so I helped open number 5. And I was asked a similar question, oddly enough, from the ownership: what do you expect of yourself and of this company in the next 5 years? I had no idea how to answer that. I was like, I don't know. I don't really know much about the company, except I like your beer, and it's always cold, and the staff is nice, so they're friendly. So that was my answer at the time. I said, I don't know. I just expect opportunity. That was, you know, that was what I was promised. I wasn't promised a high salary. I wasn't promised a great location. I was just promised opportunity, and that's what I expect in 5 years, is to see that opportunity realized for more and more people within our organization.
Fantastic. Well, we are at our time right now. So half an hour goes by real fast, doesn't
Have
it?
fun.
Very good. So stay tuned, because the next time you see Jim and I together, we'll be at the brew house, bar location, sharing a JD. I think we can do that legally on TV, right? We can
do that here.
We can do that here, right?
I have a
Yes, we
cooler in my
can.
office,
We
yeah.
can. So thank you very much, Jim. It was a pleasure, and Mo for doing all the video. And stay tuned. There'll be more Coffee with Lisa coming soon.
Pleasure's mine. Thank you, Lisa.
Thank
And
you.
thank you, world.
Take care.